My name's Dave Ford and this is my dog, Logan. Out on another walk on the New Forest. Now today we're at a beautiful setting. You can just see behind me Hatchet Pond, which is near the village of East Boldre, just to the south of Beaulieu. And today we're going to be doing a circular route. We'll be going round the pond and into the far distance. You can see the Hawkhill Inclosure there. Before we do that though, we're going to head south from here. I've just parked at Hatchet Moor car park. We're going to head towards East Boldre itself. There's a few things I want to show you there. It's a glorious day. It's December the 3rd, I think. About 2 or 3 degrees, so a little chilly, but the sun's out. There's no wind. Perfect day for walking. Do join us. Well, I've just crossed the road from the Hatchet Moor car park. I think it's the B3054. You can probably hear the traffic behind me. There's something I want to show you just over my shoulder. Now, can you make it out? There are some letters that are being carved into the ground that spell the word Beaulieu. I'll see if I can get a photograph up on screen from an aerial shot. I don't have a drone, but even if I did, I wouldn't be able to use it because the flying of drones is illegal on the New Forest unless you've got permission from the Forestry Commission. So, what are these letters? Well, as you can see, they're carved out in chalk. Thought to have been done between 1910 and 1916. The letters are about 15 foot wide and the word itself is 110 foot long. And it's thought that it relates to a flying school that was here more or less 110 years ago. And whilst the flying school was here, I'll explain a bit more about the school itself later on, but when it was here they used to do air races, and maps of the day showed the circuits that they flew. Now, they weren't allowed to put up flagpoles or pylons by the authorities, so they may well have used this sign on the ground as a reference, as a turning point for the return leg of a race. But, now, they were covered up during the Second World War because there was an RAF station at Beaulieu just over the road, so they didn't want to make it too easy for the Germans. And the letters here themselves, I believe they were restored as recently as 2004. Okay, so we're now going to, we'll do a little detour to East Boldre because there's something I want to show you there before we go on to the main part of our walk. We've just walked over a little area of land called Bagshot Moor, and we're now just on the outskirts of the village of East Boldre, just by their village hall. And so I can tell you a little bit about the airfield that I was talking about when we were looking at those Beaulieu Letters. In fact, there's a rather helpful information board up the side of the village hall, and I won't read it in its entirety, but basically back in 1910 a couple of chaps, William McCardle and John Armstrong Drexel, they started up a civilian flying school in 1910, but it only was around for a couple of years. It closed in 1912, and then the Royal Flying Corps, the forerunners to the RAF, took over the airfield for training pilots, ground crew and observers for the Western Front. And it tells us that the airfield was enlarged again in 1918, but flying ceased in 1919, and the airfield as such wasn't used in the Second World War. But between 1945 and 1950, the Airborne Forces Experimental Establishment, who are based at RAF Beaulieu over on the other side of the road, they used this area as a parachute dropping zone. But very little remains of the the very old airfield, but this building here was an officers' mess, and I believe it was gifted to the villagers of East Boldre as a thank you for their efforts during the war. Well, I think this is a very small devil's finger, I think. I'm not a great expert on fungi, but I very rarely see these. You can see photographs up on the internet, but people obviously keep quiet as to the exact location. That's been slightly damaged, probably by a pony, but even so, and a very small one. But I wonder if there's some more around here. Ah, there's another one there. They're not the prettiest of looking things, are they? There's another one over here as well. Just slightly hidden, but they almost look like little octopusy things. We're quite close to a small pond, so in fact, yeah, just looking through there you can just about see it. So they like damp conditions. And look at these down here, almost like eggs really. Obviously going to develop into something. There's another one over there as well. Quite fascinating really. Well, we're now back at the beautiful setting of Hatchet Pond. Let's turn around. That lovely scene with the swan peacefully paddling away in the background. So let me tell you a bit about the pond. It's actually the largest body of water within the Crown lands of the New Forest, and it was created over 200 years ago. Now, it was thought that originally it was formed as a series of marl pits. That's M-A-R-L. Marl is a mixture of lime and clay used to improve farmland, and one of the commoners' rights was to be able to dig marl from the forest earth and improve their land. And the chap Haywood Sumner, who's a well-known New Forest historian from the past, he suggested that the action of wind on the water collected in the pits wore away the edges to form this lovely pond. But in 1790 it was flooded by damming up one end, and you can probably see, we'll have a look in a minute, but you can see some brickwork on the side there, and that's to supply water to a mill, Hatchet Mill, which is just over the road, which had a water wheel. I mean, the machinery is now long gone and it's a private house. So let's go for a wander along the side. There is a busy road there, so hopefully that's not going to spoil your enjoyment of the walk. We've just left Hatchet Pond. One thing I meant to say about the pond, amazing how many fish there are. There's tench and bream and roach. There used to be carp, but I believe in April of this year all the carp were removed because they were something to do with the way they were feeding on the bottom of the pond or lake, and it was creating problems. So no carp there. Anyway, so we've crossed the, I think it's the B3055, heading on to some heath. We're going to be heading towards Fursey Lodge. As we do so, some lovely houses along here. Look at this thatched property here, and this is very much typical of the New Forest around these parts. Isn't that lovely? And this is now where we're heading. We have had a fair bit of rain here over the last couple of months or so, so parts of this route might be a bit marshy, but at the moment it's looking pretty good, and certainly all the paths that we're going to be on won't be a problem at all. We've just come across a very small Bronze Age barrow that you could very easily miss it, but there's a very obvious ditch that goes round the side, and then a very small mound. I mean, it can only be a matter of feet high, but there's quite a few around here. We're going to see a much larger one very shortly, but thought I'd take in the view while we were here. Well, we just had this lovely walk up the side of a wood, which you can probably just see over my shoulder. That's the Hawkhill Inclosure, and we've just crossed the road, and I'm just now beside another Bronze Age barrow, but this is, I think it's called Hatchet Pond barrow actually. It's bigger than it looks because there's gorse on top of it. It's about 25 meters in diameter, but only about, well, it's not even a meter high, I believe. And it's a listed ancient monument, and I think there's at least 4 of them around this area. Well, I've no idea what this is. Obviously it's a lump of concrete of some variety, but what it is doing in the middle of this heath, I don't know. I wonder if it's got anything to do with there was, to say, the RAF Airfield at Beaulieu, just a few hundred yards away. I wonder if it had anything to do with that, but this is the second one of these that I've seen out here. But I can't think of what it is or why it's here, but I thought I'd point it out anyway. Well, close by to that barrow is this long, narrow sort of earthen bank, and if you look on an Ordnance Survey map, it just says Earthworks. I'll just point the camera around. This is about half of it here. And there is a ditch on one side, but no one's 100% sure what it is or why it's here. It's called Cerdic Bridgehead. I think I've got his name right. Cerdic was one of the first kings of the Wessex Saxons, and shortly after, when the Romans left in whatever it was 500 AD, around about that time, There were a number of groups of folk around this neck of the woods that battled it out for a while to gain supremacy, and Sir Dick and his lot won a very bloody battle just a couple of 100 yards away to the south of here at, on the Beaulieu Heath. In fact, as recently as the 18th century, the area was known as the Bloody Marshes. But I did contact a chap called Anthony Passmore, who's a well-known expert on New Forest history, just to ask him about these banks, and he pointed me in the direction of an article that had been written by a guy. There's something like 6 of these banks floating around the area, and no one's really sure how they were formed or why they were formed. It's thought they were Saxon, but there's no pottery left or any evidence. And it's one of the problems we have, of course, that after the Romans left, and really up until, well, I suppose when the Normans came and started things like the Domesday Book, there's a lot of that chunk of British history that a lot we don't really know about. And it's a very odd place to have a defence, because what is it actually supposed to be defending? It's just a straight line, and it would be quite easy just to circumnavigate it by riding or walking round either end. But there we go. A little mystery. Well, we're now heading back across the heath back to Hatchet Pond. One thing I will mention, if you're walking across here, you might notice from time to time what looks like straight furrows in the ground and wonder what they are. Well, back in the Second World War, we had our RAF Beaulieu over in the far distance, but this area would have been a prime site for the Germans to land aircraft. So basically what they did is they built these defensive banks, and if you look at a Google map today, you can still just about make out where that defensive system was. Gradually it's all been eroded away. Well folks, we've come to the end of our walk. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please comment, like and subscribe, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for another walk in the New Forest sometime in the future. Now, Logan and I are off to, I think it's the Turf Cutters Arms in East Boldre, for a bowl of piping hot soup. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and cheerio. Right, are we ready to get warmed up?